Death Claims, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 2. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, University of Wisconsin Press, Terrace Books. Narrator, Eric Ost. Chapter 20. In front of the white ranch house, with its low shake roof, long porch window boxes of red geraniums, the old oaks dropped speckled shadow on 5 cars, the evangelist's Lincoln limousine was gone. Instead, there were a tomato-red Corvette, a bronze Nova, and a boxy white panel truck, lettered in crisp black letter with the name of an electronics manufacturer. The broad-beamed estate wagon was still there, and so was the yellow Lotus. Dave parked next to the truck, got out, and shut the door quietly. The valley was a scoop of sunlit light, silence. Someplace far off, a crow cawed 3 times and stopped. Then nearer, a typewriter rattled. The motor of a small electric tool whined. Dave went to the Lotus and knelt on the flagging, which was clean except for a scatter of brittle brown oak leaves. He reached up under the left rear fender and scraped with a fingernail. When he brought his hand out, it was salted with white sand. "Hold it right there." The accent was southwest. Dave saw cowboy boots warped up at the toes, run over at the heels, matted underneath with dried manure and straw, a pair of short bow legs and worn Levi's, a faded blue work shirt, dark with sweat under the arms, a leather brown face, clean shaven, broad cheekboned, a weathered Stetson pushed back on hair that was Indian straight, Indian black, narrow eyes that glittered like basalt, and a revolver in a work-gnarled hand. "Stand up and state your business." "Insurance claims investigator." Dave stood and brushed away the sand. "Medallion life. If you'll let me reach for it, I'll show you my identification." "I don't give a damn for your identification. I want to know what you want." "I want to talk to Mr. Cochran." "He ain't here." "His car is here." Dave touched the yellow paint. "He didn't take a car. He took a horse." "When do you expect him?" "I don't know. But you're not going to be here. Either you're going to climb back in that car of yours and hightail it out of here just to oblige me, or the sheriff can come and ride you away in his car. Then, if you still want to pay Mr. Cochran a visit, you phone ahead next time and make an appointment. And when you come to keep it. Go straight to the door. Don't sneak around fooling with his car. Come on." The gun barrel nudged the air. "Move it out." "I think I'd better talk to Mrs. Cochran." "Mrs. Cochran's a sick old blind lady. She ain't got strength to waste on strangers." "I'm not a stranger. I was here a couple of days ago. You saw me on the porch with the dog. The red setter? When you came riding in at the gate." "Scratching a dog's ears and tampering with a car is 2 different things." "All right." Dave pushed hands into pockets and leaned back against the Lotus. "Phone the sheriff. I need him more than you do. And if you call him, it'll save me a dime." The man squinted. "What do you need him for?" "I'm investigating a murder," Dave said. "And now I'm up against a gun." "I don't have a gun." "The sheriff has. Or maybe you don't want him to find out a murder investigation is taking place on Wade Cochran's ranch. He might not be able to resist the chance to see himself on the 6 o'clock news." The man scowled and moved his tongue around his teeth inside his clamped mouth. He took a breath. "All right, step up on the porch there." He twitched the gun barrel again and pressed the doorbell. Katie wore a starchy shirt-maker dress again, but this one was blue. It changed the color of her eyes, but nothing else was different. Her frizzy red hair was still pulled back tight and knotted, and a yellow pencil was still stuck into the knot. She looked at the gun, at Dave, at the brown man. "What's the trouble, Hank?" "Caught this man tampering with the Lotus." "What?" It was the farm wife voice of the old woman from someplace out of sight. "What?" Katie glanced over her shoulder. "It's all right, Mother Cochran. I'll handle it." She studied Dave. "Medallion sells nothing but life insurance, Mr. Brandstetter, and you investigate deaths. Isn't that what's on your business card? Deaths, not automobiles?" I'm investigating a death, Dave said. A drowning with violence. It happened at a place called Arana Blanca. That's Spanish for white sand. It rained that night. White sand is caked under the fenders of Mr. Cochrane's car. Does he let other people drive it? Drive it? Hank snorted. Hell, he don't even let 'em touch it. Me included, and I run this ranch for him. He even washes it himself. Not thoroughly, Dave said. Don't fire. I'm going to take a photograph out of my pocket. Hank? The old woman's voice came sharply. Have you got that 6-shooter out again? This is serious, ma'am. Hank called. He growled at Dave. All right, take it out, but slow. I'd like you both to look at it, Dave said. Did you ever see this boy? Was he ever here at the ranch? Katie reached for the snapshot, frowned at it, shook her head, passed it to Hank. He held the gun level with Dave's gut and took 3 steps backward on the green porch boards. His hard eyes dropped for a weary second to the little curled square of glossed paper, then they were on Dave again. The shabby boots came back. He held the snapshot out. Nope, never. Chromed wire spokes glittered at the edge of the door. Katie held half open. The old woman said, What's this all about? Fingers twisted by arthritis gripped the door and swung it wider. Her bones looked strong, but the flesh on them was wasted. She was smaller than David thought. At her withered throat was a fine old silver brooch. A bright afghan covered her legs. Open on it lay a big book in braille, the stiff pages sand-colored. She turned up to them, a face honed by prairie wind and sun. The question came sharp from crinkled lips, held to shape by expensive dentures. You said someone used my son's car. Hank here doesn't think so, Dave said. I heard what he said. Nothing wrong with my ears. This is Arana Blanca, the only place you know of that's got white sand. It's the only place I know of where John Oates was killed, and the day he was killed was the only day it's rained in the past month. And on that day, he telephoned here. Dave looked at Katie and named the date and time. It's on his telephone bill. Do you keep a record of incoming calls? Yes, but I really think Mr. Cochrane ought. Go look it up, Katie, the old woman said, and Katie went brisk and prim across the handsome pegged floors and out through the double doors that had fern patterns etched in their long, milky panes. She left the doors open. Beyond them, the sun sparkled on the blue water of the swimming pool. At the pool's near end, a pair of Japanese boys in white lab smocks were taking the entrails out of the video tape recorder equipment. At the side of the pool, a hawk-faced young man in a shirt with rosebud stripes rattled a selectric on the redwood table, while a man with a gray beard, leaned over the back of his chair, craning to read the words he typed. The old woman turned the flat black mirror surfaces of her glasses toward Dave. I don't know what your game is, but I think you're bluffing. I never heard of any John Oates, and my son tells me everything. Always has. Then maybe it wasn't your son who got the call, Dave said. Maybe it was Peter Oates. He did tell you about Peter Oates, didn't he? Almost every night for 2 weeks he was in El Molino to watch Peter Oates in a play. And almost every night after the play they went to dinner together, and the night after the last performance of the play they spent together in a motel. Then Peter left home, and a note from his father's desk has the boy's name on it with the phone number of this ranch. Hank, the old woman said, go get Wade. But he's at the lodge, Hank protested. You know he don't let anybody bother him there. If I showed up there, he'll have my hide. He'll come here to me, she snapped. He's got some tall explaining to do. Now get a move on. Ma'am, I don't want to leave you unprotected. Don't talk like a bigger fool than you are. There's 4 men out there by the pool, and there's 3 more out and around the place working. I can still yell if I need to. Yes, ma'am. Hank glowered at Dave. All right. He wheeled and bow-legged off on his round-heeled boots, the gun hanging from his hand like a thing to be thrown away. He disappeared around the corner of the house. Why send him? Dave asked. Why not phone? There's no phone at the lodge. No electricity. Running water from a well with a fuel powered pump. Cost a fortune. But that's all. It's Wade's private place. A man public as he is, you don't know what that's like. And he's a spiritual man. He's got to be able to get away by himself. Just him and his lord. Built this ranch for what that to start with. Get clean away from Hollywood, but it didn't work. Not for long. Pretty soon he was busier here than he'd been in town. His writers are out there now. He was to be back down here for lunch and a story conference with them at noon and to test out that machine that's been fixed before the machine mechanics can get away. She frowned. Queer, not like Wade. Not to. The fern-patterned doors rattled closing. The old woman turned her head. Katie, that you? Yes. She came back between the tufted horsehair chairs with marble-top tables, the ruby glass coal oil lamps. She said stiffly to Dave, John Oates did call on the day you said at the time. Who? His throat felt dry. He swallowed. Who did he ask for? What do you mean? A line appeared between the pale red eyebrows. Mr. Cochran, of course. Not of course, Dave said. He could have asked for his son, Peter Oates. The boy in that snapshot I showed you. Is it written down that he asked for Mr. Cochran? It is. But even if it wasn't, why would he ask for someone who wasn't here? I told you. I remember what you told me, and I remember what Mr. Cochran doesn't allow you to lie. Are there any more notations about the call? There aren't, but then I looked at the memo. I remembered it. This is an unlisted number and hard to get. She gave him a tight little smile. As you know, his name meant nothing to me. I told him so. He said if Mr. Cochran heard it, he'd talk to him. I put the phone on hold and went and found Mr. Cochran. He took the call in his bedroom, then he drove it off. Right, Dave felt sick. He bent and touched the old woman's knotted hand. Thank you, Mrs. Cochran. I'll be on my way now. No. She caught his wrist. Her grip was painfully strong. You wanted to see Wade. Hank just rode out that gate on a horse, Dave said. He told me your son left here on a horse. There's no way into the lodge by car, and how far is it? How long will it take? An hour up, an hour back. But you wait. You have to hear his explanation. It wouldn't explain anything, Dave said. Wade Cochran never did a wrong thing in his life, she cried. You don't know him. I do. He said, to love somebody isn't necessarily to know him. Then you tell me what you know, she said fiercely. Katie, run along. I want to talk to this man alone. Katie opened her mouth to protest, shut it again, and left. When the fern doors latched, the old woman let go Dave's wrist. You come in here and shut that door and tell me why you think my beautiful son killed this man Oates. You don't want to hear it, Dave said. You think I'm weak, she said. You're wrong. I'm crippled up and I'm blind. That's the Lord's will, and he's blessed me 100 other ways, and I don't complain. But I'm not weak. I'm strong. Her jaw closed on the word like a trap meant to splinter bone. If I wasn't strong, Wade would never be where he is today. Now you tell me what you know, and you tell it to me straight. Who was this John Oates? Dave shut the door. I'd like a drink, he said. If you mean whiskey, we don't keep it. Wheel me over by a chair so you can sit. He did. Her lined face turned toward him. Stoic, he told her who John Oates was, about the burns, about the morphine, about Dwight Ingalls and Sam Wald. The day he died, he phoned them first. They both told him they weren't coming. Later, they lost their nerve and did go. But he couldn't know that would happen, and he needed money. So he phoned your son. He'd held off on that a long time, probably out of love for his own son. Everyone says they were very close, but in the end, drugs don't permit you any decency. But she was very white. He was blackmailing those other men. How could he blackmail Wade? Why would he think Wade would give him money? Dave took a grim breath and let it out. Mrs. Cochran, Peter Oates is a homosexual. Do you know what that means? She sniffed, her mouth twitched. I've lived a long time, mister. I've seen and heard just about everything a woman of 75 could be expected to, and a mite more than most. I know what you're talking about. She turned her face away. What it got to do with my son? Maybe nothing, Dave said. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. He's in his 30s. He's never married. There's a lot of publicity about him in the magazines. None of it ever mentions a woman. No woman except you. He's attached to me, she flared. He wouldn't hurt me by trifling with woman. What other woman could have made him what I did? He's got everything a man could ask for in this world, and he's doing good with it. He's serving Jesus Christ with it, not like the rest of them with their drunk and their nightclubs and their divorces. Right, Dave said. But when John Oates called, he went around Blanca's 50 miles from here, and it was a rainy night. But he got in that yellow Lotus of his, and he went there. There's got to be a reason. He wasn't afraid. He's afraid of no man. He's got no cause to be afraid. Her warped fingers gripped hard on the book in her lap. He'd seen this boy Peter in this play, you say. They'd taken supper together. It must have been to talk business. The boy's an actor. It wasn't the boy who called. Anyway, your son told me he wasn't interested in Peter as an actor. He pretended he hardly remembered him. He said they'd had a meal together. Once. That wasn't true. Shall I tell you what I think was true? She didn't say yes, but she waited. I think your son fell in love with Peter Oates. He's beautiful and gentle. I think Peter fell in love with him. I think they slept together at that motel, and I think they wanted to go on sleeping together. It couldn't be here, but it could be up at that lodge of his, where no one goes but himself. Her dry lips moved, but no speech came. The boy went home and packed his belongings. That much is fact. He talked to his father. On that I haven't the facts. His father refused to discuss it with the girl whose house he and Peter were sharing, but it upset him badly. And I think I know what it was. Peter had a weakness for honesty. He and his father had been good friends. I think he told him he was homosexual, that he'd found a man to love and was going to live with him. He gave his father the phone number here. Obviously, he also gave him the name of the man, your son's name. Did he know his father was a dope fiend? She was trembling, her voice scratched like an old phonograph record. If he did, it was a wicked thing to do, a terrible thing. He's destroyed my son. I think he was like you, Dave said. If he'd paid attention, he would have noticed changes in his father, something wrong. But he loved the man, and it blinded him. I'm sorry he didn't see, because he didn't want to see. No, I don't think he knew his father was an addict. But she wasn't listening. She was grinding the words out under her breath. Destroyed my son, my wonderful son. Destroyed him. She jerked her head up and was fierce again. That boy can't be handsome. He can't be gentle. You're lying. He plotted with his father to get money out of Wade. Her jaw thrust forward, the pinched nostrils flared. And if Wade did kill the man, if he did, he didn't tell that boy. He didn't suspect any plot. He wanted to keep him. There wasn't much chance Peter would hear of his father's death, not shut away up there at that lodge. And when he did hear, he'd hear of an accident, a drowning. That was how Wade had arranged the murder to look. Only I didn't believe it, and I turned up here, saying I thought Peter had killed his father for his insurance. That my company wasn't accepting the verdict of death by misadventure. Wade couldn't go to the lodge right then because you had plans for him, and that evangelist and your plans for him come first. But next morning he went. What happened up there, I don't know. What I do know is that in a few hours Peter walked into police headquarters at El Molino and turned himself in for the murder of his father. He stood up and looked down at the beautiful white hair. There's a Bible verse, Mrs. Cochran. I'm sure you know it better than I do. Greater love hath no man than this. She didn't lift her head. She finished it tonelessly. That he lay down his life for his friend. Do you want me to get Katie for you? She shook her head. I want to pray. He left her like that, alone in the middle of the handsome make-believe room, at the end of her make-believe world. A Gay Mysteries Audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.